The year that I celebrated my 18th birthday, my life changed dramatically. That September, I left the home that I had always known in the mountains of West Virginia to move to the big city of Cincinnati to attend college. One of the first people I met when I arrived at school was this sweet and funny guy named Danny. Danny was one of those people that you want to get to know when you're new in town. Danny had a lot of friends. Just about everywhere he went, he knew people. And he was never shy about introducing me to every friendly face we ran across. He encountered friends wherever he went, including when he was by himself. Danny had this big blue Chevrolet Impala that must have been about as old as he was, maybe older. I will never forget the first time that I got into this behemoth of a car with him. Before he started the engine, Danny placed his hand on the dashboard, and he paused and he said, "Good morning, Miss Michelle. How are you doing today?" He went on to introduce me to his car and politely asked her if she would be so kind to take us to the mall. On the drive to the mall, I couldn't help but ask Danny about Miss Michelle. Danny explained that she was one of his best friends. She, the car was definitely a she in his mind, had belonged to his grandfather and had been a gift for his 18th birthday. That was the start of a beautiful relationship. And for years now, Danny and Miss Michelle had gone everywhere together, literally. Danny clearly understood that he relied on his car and saw no reason not to honor the relationship by blessing it with kind and friendly words. I observed that he did the same thing at home, in his apartment, with other inanimate objects, like the washing machine and the toaster. Now, I have read self-help books about cultivating an attitude of gratitude. I'm sure you've read some of those books too. Books that suggest that we become more intentional about expressing our thanks for what we encounter as we go through our day. But until I met Danny, I don't think I'd ever met anyone that actually did it. Of course, Danny wasn't just friendly and personable with his Impala and his appliances. He was naturally warm and open to the people around him too, be they familiar buddies or total strangers. Seeing him move through life with such grace and gratitude made me think about myself. I couldn't help but wonder how he got that way and why I wasn't more like him. Thanking your car for getting you someplace may seem like a silly idea, but maybe it is a practice that leads to other things that are not so silly. I found out much later that Danny's grandfather, the first owner of Miss Michelle, had been one-quarter Lakota Sioux. And he had spent a lot of time with Danny when he was a child, teaching him the spiritual beliefs and the ways of their ancestors. Danny would sometimes quote his granddad, "With all things, we are relatives," he'd proclaim, a traditional saying among First Peoples. Now, I wasn't raised with that kind of wisdom or that kind of religion. In the church of my childhood, religion referred pretty specifically to a collection of certain stories about certain people, much of it from a particular era in human history. Being holy and spiritual was about believing in the miracles of the Old Testament and following the theological teachings of a guy from Galilee who lived and died, and it is said lived again 2,000 years ago. Religion belonged in that big stone building with the cross on top and the pretty colored windows. Holy words, well, those were Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, not Leo Tolstoy or Harper Lee. Inspirational music, well, that was Amazing Grace, not Baby Hit Me One More Time. Most Western religions tend to draw pretty clear lines between the sacred and the secular, between the prophetic and the profane. And this is because much of Western faith is not really about the here and the now, or at least not on the surface. It centers on wisdoms revealed centuries ago and truths that point towards a better and perfected life that is yet to come after this one is over. Or at least that's the way many modern people have chosen to interpret and internalize their religions. That was how I saw church as a young person. And over time, that made religion less and less relevant as I faced upheavals and struggles, moral dilemmas and complicated relationships that required immediate hope and help. About 10 years ago, a series of high-profile suicides by LGBTQ teenagers brought national attention to the problem of bullying. In response, activist Dan Savage began a media campaign that some of you may remember. It was called It Gets Better. Celebrities and sports stars and politicians offered personal video messages assuring young people that their circumstances could and would improve over time. These were powerful messages that were needed and probably saved many lives. For me, the religion of my childhood was a lot like that. The message was, it gets better. Heaven awaits if you believe. This crappy world is just temporal circumstance. Better and brighter things are yet to come if you just believe and you hang in there. How different that is from my friend Danny's approach of walking through life, of saying good morning to your car, praising your dishwasher, and seeing everybody and everything as family. For my friend, reality was not about saying it gets better and believing that we will someday be delivered from this broken and sullied world. For Danny, every day was a way of saying it is better. Trying to see the sacredness and finding the sacredness right in front of him. Imagining that he was always encountering relatives and faithful companions, both inanimate and animate. Blessed friends who were struggling and living and existing right along with him. Holiness that is holy just because it's here, right now. In that beautiful song that Andrew just sang for us, composer Peter Mayer shares how when he was growing up, he used to lament that miracles like the ones that the pastor preached about on Sunday morning didn't happen anymore. But now, Peter Mayer says, as an adult, his perspective and his faith have changed. Now he poetically speaks of no longer looking for miracles, because today he can't find anything that isn't a miracle. In declaring everything is holy now, he's throwing open wide the doors of what defines church for him, removing the stained glass windows and letting the sunlight of real life pour in. He's choosing to see the fact that he is here, that we're here, that anything is here, to be a miracle unto itself. This idea that what's sacred resides in everything is what theologians call pantheism. While various peoples and cultures throughout human history have embraced forms of belief that saw God as an all-encompassing and completely immanent presence, in Western thought, pantheism really was first defined and promoted by a 17th century Dutch philosopher named Benedict Spinoza. Spinoza's famous book, titled Ethics, set forth a theological argument for exactly the experience that song Holy Now is talking about. In his writings, Spinoza makes a case against traditional religious dualism that has long defined the spiritual realm as transcendent and the earthly realm as material. As an alternative, Spinoza built a theological system in which God does not rule over the universe, but is in fact the universe itself. God is the reality in which all of nature and humanity, all of mind and body and spirit are united as one. That sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? Sounds kind of like the interdependent web of all existence we talk about in our seventh Unitarian Universalist principle. But for Spinoza and for Peter Mayer, it's not just that everything is connected and that you and me are part of a web. It's that God is the connection. And God is all the things being connected, all at the same time. And thus, everything is holy now. Now, I don't know if my friend Danny ever heard of Benedict Spinoza, or if he considered himself a pantheist. These kinds of ideas never really came up as we rode along the highway talking to Miss Michelle. I think Danny probably just chose to try to see friends and companions and fellow travelers in everyone and everything he came in contact with. It was a perspective that had been handed down to him as part of his family's history and culture. Whatever it was, it seemed to work for him. All these years later, I sometimes wonder why I didn't pick up those pantheistic habits from my friend. I wonder why I still struggle so much with this need to judge, to decide that some things are holy and good and that other things don't deserve my attention or my reverence. I mean, I get all this on an intellectual level. I even get it on a religious level. But my heart and my mind still struggle. For me, and maybe for you, moving into that deeper perspective and that truer level of consciousness requires that I pay attention to what's happening around me. It can be easy to have a spiritual moment when I'm gazing out over the Grand Canyon or beholding a dazzling sunset right here in Louisville. But turning my gaze downward to notice a single leaf, a lonely blade of grass, finding beauty and wonder there, that takes intention. Having gratitude and praise for not only some inspiring musical concert or a gathering with friends that we haven't seen in a long time, but also feeling awe for just waking up on a Thursday, for going and doing our weekly shopping at Kroger, That takes practice. If I learned anything from my friendship with Danny, it is that the more that we practice identifying what is sacred in the simple and the everyday, the commonplace parts of our lives, the more naturally it comes. And thus the fuller and the grander everything becomes. The other day I was out enjoying the fall here in Louisville, near my house out on Southern Parkway. And as I walked along, and the cool wind blew, and the red and gold leaves flew around, and the cars whizzed by on the road, and I waved at my neighbor who was sitting on her front porch smoking a cigarette, I could hear Peter Mayer singing to me in my mind. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips. But now I have to hold my breath because I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world that was just half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down. But now I walk with a reverent air, because everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. So may it be with us.